Yes, thanks everybody for joining us. And again, without our sponsors, Bow to Stern, of course, Darrel, Duck Creek Evolution Sales, Hurricane Boatyard, the Inland Waterway, NSA, ODC, Robinson and Stiff, Sailcraft, SCU, the Village Brewery, which I hear is going to be reopening shortly as soon as they finish their repair, the Village Hardware, Village Realty, Waterline Marine, Windward Ventures, which is Henry Fraser, and Zimmerman's. So if we can continue to support all these people that support us, it's really important. Also, just an update, take a look at your insurance. We just got our insurance and it just went up $700. So the insurance companies are whacking everybody. So make sure you take a look at that. And with that, we're going to let Darrel help us take care of our vessels.
There we go. Hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining this morning. As they were saying, my name is Darrel Foster. Me and my wife Sharon, we run Foster's Mobile Marine Service out of here. We service Oriental and New Bern areas, and we come to you this morning to do the training and everything. We thoroughly enjoy doing this. We've been doing it for a few years now, and hopefully everybody gets something out of it. And then what we'll be doing is we'll have stop them periodically and ask them questions. And then at the end, we'll go through the chat and everything and answer as many questions as we can. So with that being said, yes, just a little bit of my background. I spent 20 years in the Coast Guard. I retired in 2008. Went and worked for Sailcraft Service there for about 7 years. I was their head mechanic there. And then we decided, you know what, let's try to do this on our own. And we've been doing this now for about 10 years. So we've had a real good time, met a lot of good people. And yeah, so we thoroughly enjoy working with the community and stuff. So, all right. Also, I'd like to take time to thank the Sailing Club of Oriental, the Oriental Dinghy Club, New Sailing Association for offering these seminars and stuff. Also, special thanks go to Chuck, Sharon, and Dennis for organizing the seminars, and also for Bob for helping out with everything. Okay? All right. Today's seminar is going to be about your auxiliary systems on your boats. We're dealing with your air conditioning, your refrigeration, your plumbing, bilges, and just going through every boat's going to be a little bit different. Every boat's going to have a little bit of different, but these are the main ones that 90% of the boats going to have on them, okay? Air conditioning. This is a big one. Most of these units do heat and air, okay? And this is your basic, what you're going to find on most of your sailboats these days. You're going to have the unit itself, then you're going to have the ducting that's going through different vents and different areas. The thing about these ACs is they're water cooled. So you have to have a through hull with the valve. You have to have a stringer, and then it's going to go to the pump, and then through the unit, and then overboard. And then, like I said, you have your different types of displays and your controls and stuff. And one thing I found odd is a lot of boats, unless you order them from the factory, most of these boats don't come with air conditioning. So these are units that we can install aftermarket, depending on the layout and stuff. Okay. All right. One problem we run into a lot, we're going into the troubleshooting aspect of it, and 90% of the calls I get are because of water flow. And the problem you run into is when you run these ACs constant, especially in the summertime, the heat, especially here in North Carolina and everything, a lot of times these units do not shut down that much during the day. So 90% of the problems you have with them are with the water flow, and mostly it's because of the strainers. A lot of people forget to clean the strainers. So it's very important to keep an eye on the strainers and stuff, especially if your ACs are running all the time. All right, AC runs, but will not blow cold. Again, make sure. I get quite a few calls, especially when it goes from winter time where you've been running the heat, and then you start to get into the spring and summer where you want to shift over to air conditioning, and the fan comes on, but it's not blowing. And what has happened is evidently it gets shifted into heat mode, and some of these units you have to either manually shift it back into air conditioning mode, or you can go into the programming where it'll do it automatically. So make sure it's going into cold mode. Also, air filters. Just like in your house, you got air filters on these units here on your boat. You got to make sure they don't get full of lint, dog hair, fur, and all that stuff, because they will clog up and it restricts the airflow. And when your airflow gets restricted, that's when you start icing up the evaporator, because it's relying on that air blowing across it to keep it from, freezing up. All right. Same thing. If you're in the wintertime, the air won't blow warm. Make sure it's in heat mode. Check your water flow. Now, the reason you have to watch your water flow in air conditioning mode, most of the time, if you don't have water flow, it's going to trip off on high pressure. Okay. Problem is, when you're in heat mode, that a lot of times these units will not trip off if you lose water flow. So this thing will continuously run, and I've seen them turn into a big block of ice. So it's important to make sure, you keep the strainers clean, make sure you have good water flow. All right. Another thing, in the wintertime, if you're in heat mode, once the water temperature gets down to about 45 degrees or below, these units are not going to work that efficient. And once it gets down to that point, your best thing to do,
if you need to stay there, or just do what you need to do,
is to shut it off. All right.
You deal with it when you get here. The game's going to be 3-4 hours, so.
I'm sorry, Eva. Can you please mute your video there, please? All right. Now, that again, like I said, with the unit running, it shuts off on high pressure. You make sure that's a water flow issue most of the time. Check your valve, check your strainer, make sure your pump's coming on, and also check your overboard discharge. Because we have, like I said, again, we have mud daubers in the South here, and they love filling, they'll block up a through hull real quick. So if you don't have good discharge, that's also going to cause a problem. All right. And then can't get water pumped. Okay. Again, check your valve.
Well, do you want to eat at the chili cook-off and then wait until another time to grill here? We can do that too.
Hey, Darrell, I think you can.
That's what we're going to do.
Why don't we do that? No.
There we go. All right.
Is that muted?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So again, it's important whenever you kick these units on, look overboard. Make sure you got water coming over the side. If not, go through, check it, make sure you open your valves. A lot of people, like they should, shut their valves when they leave the boat. Sometimes they forget to open. Okay. All right. Another thing is, like I said, most of these boats have had ACs installed aftermarket. They don't come factory. The problem I see, though, is when people install these, they install them incorrectly. If you look at the upper left-hand corner, that is a correct one. The through hull's below the water line, the strainer's below the water line, and the AC pump is below the water line. Okay, the unit itself can be above the water line, but the rest of it needs to be under. And the reason is because the way these pumps are designed, they do not suck water. They only push water. And that don't make a whole lot of sense. But if air gets in this pump, it will not push it out itself. You have to, bleed them. So it's important to make sure that if everything's under the water line, when you open a through hull, the water pressure itself will push it, push it through. The top right hand, everything's below the water line, but you got a lot of dips and loops in the line. Again, the straighter you can make the run, and the better off you're going to be. And also the two on the bottom, the strainers are above the water line, and the pump is below. So you're going to wind up with an air pocket there. And also, when you look at the pump, if the center is where the suction, the water comes in, the discharges needs to be at the top, or in order for all the air to get out. If not, then air can get trapped in this pump, and then you have to go in there and you have to manually bleed the air out. And to bleed these pumps, what you have to do is you have to pull the discharge hose off and open the seawater valve so you have good water flow coming out of them. Then you can put the hose back on. What I've done in the past is it gives me and install basically a bleed valve. And it's a valve, instead of taking the hose off, you just open this valve until you have good water flow coming out, close the valve, and then you got all the air and stuff out of the system. Okay? So it's like I said, it's very important whenever you install these. The seawater is 90% of the problems you're going to have with these AC units. All right, another problem you run into is over time, you're going to have growth and buildup in the condensers of these AC units. And it's just like, any other unit, if it takes heat transfer for this thing to work. So if you have a lot of buildup and sludge and stuff in these units, you're not going to have the heat transfer properly, and they're not going to work efficient. So we always recommend every couple of years, if you come in and have a flush done, we use this barnacle buster. And basically what we do is we hook it up to the unit, take a pump and just flush it through there for a couple hours. It cleans out all that, and it makes them work a whole lot more efficient. Best thing to do with that, though, is run it backwards. If you want to do that, run it backwards through the system. That way, any large pieces or anything that might be trapped in there, it'll push them out. Okay? All right. Now, you have several different types of air conditioning which you'll find on these boats. One is the hatch mount, portable ones. You don't see these too often because a lot of the companies have quit making these. But one thing I have seen recently, and it seems to be working pretty good, is a couple of boats are actually using the RV type AC units, and they're installing them in the hatch, and it's almost like a permanent install. So that's another nice thing about those is you don't need seawater. So if you're on the hard or, in a place, you don't have to worry about a pump and strainers and all that. They can pretty much work their air-cooled units. I've seen quite a few people do those on the smaller boats and stuff. All right, then you have the self-contained units. These are what you'll find typically on, 40-foot boats or smaller. And basically what it is you can sit them in a locker somewhere, and then they got the ducting that runs through the boat, the vents and stuff. And then, the unit itself, everything is together. And then you have these the split or remote air conditionings. Now these here are a little bit different because you can have one condensing unit which will run 2 or 3 air handlers. And these, what you'll find is mostly on these is you'll find these on the bigger boats, the 80-foot length and boats stuff, and then they can do different zones and different areas for the air handlers. So those are the 3 types that you're mostly going to find in the on boats in the area here. All right, self-contained units. These, most of the time, these are either 110 or 220. They'll go up, several different BTUs, different models. And again, what this is basically what it says is the self-contained unit. The compressor, the condenser, evaporator, blower, all that is in one package, and it sets under a salon seat or in a locker, and then you can run it that way. And it's a good way in smaller boats to get air conditioning. Okay, most of them are going to run off of 410A now. The R22 has been completely phased out. So the ones who do have the older ones with the R22 refrigerant, just be advised here soon, you're not going to be able to get those recharged. Everything's gone to the 410A. And now they're even talking about going to something different. So they're going to be phasing out the 410A eventually. But you can still get the 410A, okay? This is an example of a split unit here. Basically what it is the condensing unit can go into like an engine compartment or, you know, a mechanical compartment. And then what they'll do is they'll put air handlers, the evaporators and the blowers in different areas of the boat, which has their own controls. So you can have this one unit, this condensing unit, running 3 or 4 air handlers, and you can control the temperatures in different parts of the boat and stuff separately. Okay. The upside to these is you can, again, you know, you don't have the noise, you don't have the heat and everything that you do from most of the self-contained units under the seat. The downside is they're fairly expensive to install. So, you know, like I said, everything's got an up and down side, but if you have to put 3 or 4 self-contained units in, then this is something you may want to look into, doing a split unit. And then at that point, it may be saving you some money. Okay. All right. Another question I get a lot is, especially with sailboats that don't have built-in generators, how can we run our AC while we're at anchor? And what they came up with is Dometic's got one that's called a Smart Start. There's also another one called an Easy Start out there. Both of these are very good units, and what it does is it takes away the start up amperage. With AC units on like a 16,000 BTU unit, the startup amperage is going to be 30, 35 amps, and then it's going to drop down to about 12 or 13 when it's running. So in all actuality, you could run these units off a 2,000 watt Honda generator, except for the startup. So what this does, this eliminates the startup amperage. And it does it, these here are what they say, they're smart starts. That's not just putting another capacitor in there. What it's doing, it's actually learning how your unit starts up. It takes about 4 or 5 times for it to start up, and it learns it. And then from then on, it sets it up to where it eliminates that startup amperage. It starts the compressor up slower, and it eliminates that. So you can actually run this unit off of a 2,000 watt Honda generator when you're at anchor. All right. A lot of people are now starting to run them off of lithium battery bank and inverters. They found they can run them for several hours doing that, depending on what size battery bank and stuff you have. So this is a really good system to think about if you're installing a new AC system stuff. A lot of times you have a hard time installing these on the older units. So, okay. All right. This is just a couple examples of aftermarket installs. The three pictures on the left is actually off of a 21-foot Flicka. The people wanted air conditioning in it, so we was able to make a panel, install it, and everything. These are all self-contained units. So yeah, you can pretty much stick these things in any locker. As long as you can get water to them and the discharge and vents, you're in good shape. So any questions as far as taking care of air conditioning and stuff this time?
Yeah, Darrell. Hi, it's Jim and Evie. Question for you. What about mold? I'm hearing about mold in the condensate tray. Is that a problem typically? And is there something you all do about that?
Yeah, I mean, what you can do with that, and what I normally tell people is if you're getting like mold and mildew and stuff in the condensation tray, if you periodically set and take a shop vac or something and vacuum it out. But you can also add like a cap full of bleach or something that like I know they use like a pool stuff to kill the mold and stuff. You can put that in the tray and just run it through there periodically. Because what will happen, even though you have it in the tray, the worst part is getting into your condensation line. And that eventually is going to clog it up to where it's going to start backing up, and then the tray's not going to drain. So yeah, you definitely need to either put a most of the problems I find with them is they rust, because on some of these units they don't drain completely. There's always like a 1/4 inch of water in the bottom of it. And it's just the way the drain is hooked up to the pan itself. But no, you can add like a hatful of bleach or something like that in there. What I normally do is I'll sit and take a container of water, put some bleach in there, squirt it around, and just pour it into the pan and let it run through. Okay.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Because we're getting a lot of mold in our bilge, and that's where the condensate line goes.
Yeah. Another, like I said, another thing is if you can, what a lot of people are doing is they're installing like the condensators, and the condensators actually pump it overboard rather than into the bilge. Okay. All right.
Good. Oh, that's a.
All right. Any other questions? Again,
Hey, Darrell.
Yes.
Darrell, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but
Yeah.
I have a 33-foot O'Day, no air conditioning. Can you give me a range to air condition that boat installation?
Usually,
installation and
yeah, if it's a new installation where we're having to run ducting, vents, everything, you could be upwards to $6,000, $7,000. It depends on how many vents you want, how many ducts you want and stuff. Where everything's going to be configured. I would recommend, either calling me or somebody, have them come out and take a look at it. We give free estimates when we come out and look at stuff like that. All right.
all right, I'll do that. Thanks.
All right. All right. Anybody else? All right. So let's move on. All right. And then all right, the next thing we're going to go over is your marine refrigeration system. All right, and believe it or not, there's not a whole lot of difference between your air refrigerator and air conditioning. They both run on your basic principle of using refrigerant. I tell people, it's like everybody says, well, with refrigeration, you're not making air cold, you're removing the heat. All right, and that's why I tell people it's good to remember, that heat's got to go somewhere. If it's a water cooled, it's pulling the heat from the room and then putting it into the water. And then vice versa, when you're in heat mode, you're taking the heat from the water and putting it into the air in the cabin. So that's why I'm saying whenever you get down to 40, 45 degree water, there's not a lot of heat in that water for it to pull from. Okay. So now, but the marine refrigeration systems, all right, there's two different types you're going to find. They're either air cooled or they're water cooled. And these are dealing with the condensers, because the condenser basically is what it says. It condenses the gas down to a liquid, and it uses either air or water to do that. All right. This is a couple different that you'll find out in the field. And some of these will do both. Like the Dometic CU200, it's actually air and water cooled. It's got, the ones with that, the water cooled like this, has to have a separate pump pumping water through that system. Okay. Then you have your different types of system components. You have there's an engine-driven compressor, which you're not finding too much in the field now, because they're starting to phase them out. You have your electric compressors, which runs off most of the time they're going to run off 12 volts. You have if you have a engine-driven system, you should have a condenser, which you will see in the second picture from the left on top. That seawater runs through that, condenses it, and a lot of times that uses the same seawater that you're pulling through the engine. The raw water pump itself is pushing water through that. All right. If you look at the top picture on the right, that is what's called a keel cooler. Now, again, even though this is still considered a seawater cooled, but it's not a pump. What it does is it uses the water on outside the boat, and it pumps it into the refrigerant into this keel cooler. The water cools it, and then it pumps it back. The important to remember thing about this is this actually goes through your through hull. I mean, through your hull. It's a through hull. And on the outside, it's bolted against the hull. So it's very important whenever you do your bottom paint, if you have one of these, do not paint this. This has got to be completely open because if you paint it, you're going to insulate it and it's not going to work properly. All right. And then you have your different types of evaporators, which you're going to see. And the one at the top, you'll see in a box there, that's called a holdover plate. And these are actually filled with the liquid that, it freezes and makes it like a big block of ice in there. And a lot of times you'll find these with the engine-driven type compressors, because what they do is they run on a timer. You turn the timer on, it freezes everything, and then it stays. Like again, they're starting to get away from that because the newer units are so energy efficient that you can just about run them on a solar panel. So a lot of these older systems are starting to get phased out. And then on the bottom, you see different types of evaporators. You got the O type going from left to right. You got the O type, you got the flat type. The nice thing about the flat ones is you can actually bend them and shape them to the shape of the box. That way, you can install these, make pretty much any ice box that you got on your boat, you can pretty much turn it into an electric refrigerator. And then you still have the type of holdover plates, but they're not the big, thick, bulky ones like they used to be. They're a lot thinner and a lot more efficient. Okay. So, I mean, the people who have just a regular ice box, if you wanted to stop buying ice and just, there's always a way you can turn this into a 12-volt refrigerator. Okay. All right. An electrical system, electrical refrigeration system. And this is what I was talking about. You have, your major components, but even in your marine AC unit, it has these same components. You have your compressor. The thing with the compressor is it can only move a gas. Okay. And from the compressor on the discharge side, now this is considered the high pressure side. Okay. It goes to the condenser. And now it's either air cooled or water cooled, and that condenses it back down to a liquid. All right, and then it's going to go through a liquid filter dryer. And basically what that does is that any contaminants that gets in there, it catches, and it also catches any moisture, because moisture is the #1 killer for a refrigeration unit. If there's any air or moisture gets in there, then you run into a problem. It'll start tearing everything up. And basically what it does, it takes the oil that's in the compressor. If you get moisture in there, it basically gets acidic, and then it starts eating everything up from the inside. All right, and then you have going up to your metering device. All right, now what this does is this is taking the high pressure liquid and turning it into a low pressure liquid. And what that does is, I tell people, it's like taking a garden hose and only turning the spigot on and having it into a spray pattern. You got a lot of pressure on one side, you got low pressure on the other. And by doing this, this is allowing this to basically boil or flash off. And that's what removes the heat, as the actual boiling of this refrigerant is what causes the heat to be absorbed by it. All right, and then once it goes through the evaporator, that's where your ice box and everything is cold. It should be a complete vapor again by the time it gets through there, and then it goes back to the compressor and the cycle starts all over again. And this works the same way in your refrigerator or in your air conditioning also. Okay. Now, this is what I'm talking about with the engine-driven ones. Okay, you have your engine-driven compressor. Most of the time, that's set up on a timer more than a thermostat. Okay, and then it goes, and it's the same thing. You got your compressor, you got your condenser. It goes to the evaporator, to the expansion valve, or in some smaller systems, they have what's called a capillary tube. Okay, and then it goes back to the compressor. But the only big difference with this is you don't need electricity to run this. As long as your engine's running, you can turn the timer on. It'll run however long you want it. And what it does is it freezes up the evaporator, the holdover plate, and then that stays cold, so it don't have to run constantly. Okay. All right, and this is just some installation. This is what I was talking about. It's just a regular ice box. We put the O-type evaporator in this thing, and inside the O is the freezer. All around the outside would be the refrigerator. And you know, you don't have to buy ice. You don't have to. And these units only run on like 3 amps. 12-volt system. They only pull about 3-4 amps when they're running. So they're really power. You know, they don't take up a whole lot of your battery bank. Okay. Any questions on refrigeration? You know, there's not a whole lot of maintenance on them other than, you know, keeping them clean. You got to make sure there's good airflow. You know, the biggest problem I find with these is they'll put these units in a locker and then they'll pile a bunch of stuff around them. So they don't get good airflow at the condensing unit. They're not working real efficient. So if you have one of these, you've got to make sure there's nothing stacked around them so they can breathe. So that, because they have to have that air moving across them, especially the air-cooled ones. Okay.
Darrell, I have a question.
Yeah, Dennis. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a Beneteau 373. There's a handful of these boats around in our area. You may be familiar with the refrigeration setup on those. They have a single sea frost compressor
Right.
that tries to run the countertop freezer and then a front load refrigerator.
Right.
The trouble I have with it is if I get the refrigerator cold enough, the freezer is running way harder than it has to. If I turn it back, you know, then the refrigerator just doesn't get cold enough. I wonder if you'd run into this. I've talked to Beneteau about it, and they weren't really excited about that design.
Yeah. The problem you run into with these is when you have one unit running 2 evaporators, then you have basically 2, you know, trying to do one. It's not set up like on a AC where they have valves that shut everything off and on. So it's a balance act on these, and a lot of times, you know, it's hard to get them figured out and stuff. There's not a whole lot you can do as far as to dial it in because these things are pretty much set. You know, they're going to do what they're going to do. I know a lot of times what people run into with some of the Beneteaus is some of the boxes are not insulated as well. And, you know, I've seen people go in there and add insulation, some spray foam and stuff. Another thing you could do is, I know if the boxes are sitting side by side, what I've seen people do is just have a freezer on one, just to evaporate, and then have a spillover fan with the thermostat on the refrigerator side. And what that'll do is that'll pull cold air from the freezer to the refrigerator, but it has its own thermostat controlling that fan, and you can control the temperature a lot better like that. Okay.
Okay, very good. Yeah, we end up usually using the freezer as the refrigerator, just that way we don't have to run it so hard. Otherwise, it's running all the time. But I didn't know if you'd run into that with the number of 373s that are around.
Yes, yeah, that is a fairly common problem also. And it's not just the Beneteau. Sometimes you'll run into it on other boats like that.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So all right. Next thing we're going to go over is the bilge system. All right. A lot of people don't even realize this is a system, but you know what? The bilges are important because, for one, the drier you can keep your bilge and the cleaner you can keep your bilge, it'll keep the smell down. Because, I mean, you know, people say, you know, call me, it's like, I got this musty smell on my boat and stuff. And you go in there and there's, you know, still 2 or 3 inches of water in the bilge and stuff. So I tell people all the time, I said, the more you can keep on top of that and keep as much of that water out of your bilge and stuff, is the easier it is to, you know, keep the smells and stuff down. You also got the mildew issue and stuff with it and everything. So a lot of people, you know, don't even look at their bilges until, you know, they have a problem. So I tell people, I recommend bilge maintenance is very important. keep an eye on, keep them clean. That's the number one thing. Keep them clean of grease and oil, debris. I've seen people, they'll set and shove these sausage booms down in their bilge and stuff. And I'm like, you can't leave that stuff in there because you're taking a chance of, it damaging the bilge pump, the float switches and stuff like that. Now also, keep an eye on it. If you're going to, that's if you have any leaks, that's what's going to wind up is in your bilge, whether it's fuel, whether it's oil, if you have hatches that are leaking, range, stuff like that. So it's important to keep all the limber holes. That way everything runs to your deep bilge. Make sure all those are cleaned out and stuff, and just keep your bilges, as clean as you possibly can. And lift up your boards. Look at them, when you get on the boat or before you leave the boat. Okay. Bilge pumps. This is another one. The bilge pumps is what is there basically to keep your boat from sinking, in emergencies and stuff. So it's very important to maintain these and test them. Test each of your bilge pumps in automatic and manual. If you can, reach down there and flip that float switch up. Make sure, make sure that bilge float switch is working properly. Make sure there's nothing around that float switch, either holding it from activating, or what I've seen is they activate and then they pull stuff in, and now they can't shut off because they're jammed up with some, rag or oil sausage boom or, stuff like that. That's why I say it's very important to make sure all the debris and stuff's out of your bilge. And then also, keep, kind of keep an eye on how often you're seeing your bilge pumps coming on. If you're, noticing this thing's kicking on every 4 or 5 minutes, then, you got water coming in somewhere. So you need to start looking at your shaft seals, make sure, your, the through holes are not leaking, stuff like that. And then, another, we just installed one of these, on a couple of these on boats. It's called the dry bilge system. And what it is, when your bilge pump kicks off, all right, there's always going to be some water left in the bottom. The bilge pump's only going to pull so much out. There's these little systems called the dry bilge system, which will set, it's just a pump with a sponge on the foot that sticks down in there, and that will remove the rest of that water out of there, which will help keep the bilges, drier. Another important thing is if your bilges are filling up, find out why. Don't say, well, my bilge pump is keeping up with it, so I'm fine. Because, I've seen so many boats get in trouble because the shore power goes out, the bilge pump runs the batteries down, and now your boat's sinking because the batteries are dead and the bilge pumps are not working. So it's very, very important to maintain your bilges and your bilge pumps. Okay. And again, this is a insurance for when you're also not there. These are some things to keep your boat floating. Bilge pumps and alarms. Another good thing to install is a bilge alarm. All right, and what this is just basically an audible alarm on a float switch or a bilge switch. It tells you, hey, the waters came up past the bilge pumps, and it gets your attention or gets the dock master's attention to say, we got a problem. And a lot of times, unfortunately, if you don't have an alarm or something, if you're not on the boat, by the time they figure out there is a problem, it's usually damaged stuff. Your floorboards are floating and, you got water damage throughout the boat. So make sure, like I said, make sure your bilge pumpers are working. Make sure there's nothing in the bilge that can block the float switches and stuff. The auto settings, and I've been on a lot of boats where, they have the toggle switch. It goes from auto off to manual for the bilge pumps, and they're on off, which is not doing any good. So make sure when you leave the boat that your bilge pumps are set in automatic operation. Okay. Valves. When you leave your boat, if you're going to be leaving your boat for a week or a long period of time, go through and make sure all your valves are closed except for your scupper valves. Okay. This is going to do a couple different things. It's going to keep your boat safe. All right, because if all your valves are closed and stuff, if something happens, especially in the winter, I've seen sea strainers freeze and bust. And then when it thaws out, the boats, start sinking because the water valve's left open. So shut off your valves when you're leaving the boat. And this, will help. And the other key is people call me and say, well, I shut off my valves, but I started my engine, forgot to open the valve. Well, I tell people, if you're going to do that, put your ignition key on the valve handle. At that point, you will not forget to open that seawater valve if you have to get the key off of it. Okay, so that's just one of those things to where. And we covered this last week on, to have a light off schedule, a checklist, a startup checklist. That way it tells you, hey, I need to open the valve, need to get the key, stuff like that. Okay. Make sure your battery charger make sure your batteries are full, make sure your battery charger is operating. All right, because if, again, these runs off 12 volt, if the batteries are dead, your bilge pumps are not going to work. All right, and if possible, have somebody periodically go by and check your boat. Just go on it, make sure everything looks good, make sure everything's still turned on and stuff. Okay? All right. Any questions on bilges?
Yeah, I have a question. It's Lisa.
Yes.
Hey, Darrell.
Hey.
Back to I have about the bilge cleaning. I'm wondering if you have a product or two that you particularly recommend. I was a little surprised at how many zeros they wanted for bilge cleaning specific products.
Right.
At the store, and wondering if those are really better. Are they worth the money? What do you think? Mm-hmm.
I mean, I like this stuff. It's called it's stuff called Bilge Bully. It's a citrus based cleaner, but in all actuality, you can use Dawn dish soap.
Mm-hmm.
You can go in there with some dish soap, because the nice thing about your dish soap and stuff, it does break down the oil and the grease and stuff like that. It's just that the other stuff that just smells better. It's got a better smell and everything. But you can go in there with just regular dish soap or a degreaser or something like that, and then go in there with a brush and just clean everything up. And then with the bilge pump, it kicks it overboard. Now, if you do have a lot of oil and stuff like that or fuel in there, I recommend getting some oil towels, oil absorbent diapers and stuff put in there. You got to get as much of that oil and fuel off the top of the water before you kick that bilge pump on. You don't want to pump fuel and oil overboard. Okay, so you got to be careful.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I piggyback off that question real quick?
Yes.
We tend to use Dawn and vinegar with water together. Would vinegar be a problem in there?
No. Vinegar shouldn't. I mean, there's nothing really in there that the vinegar is going to hurt or anything like that. Again,
Okay.
and people, they keep telling me these bilge pumps don't last. Well, the problem is these bilge pumps are designed to pump water. They're not, so if you got a lot of fuel and a lot of oil and stuff in your bilges, it also will kill the bilge pumps. They don't last as long. All right.
Hey, Darrell, John Schwab here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, John.
Hey, yeah, I don't think you can emphasize enough, keeping a dry bilge. That's kind of one of my pet peeves. And the way we've been doing it is, as far as the air conditioning condensate, is using one of those condensators. And the only one that I've found, and there may be others out there that you know of, but Mermaid Marine Air makes one that goes in the discharge line. It kind of uses the Venturi system.
Right.
The problem we have with that, every couple of years, probably that little ball valve in there gets kind of gunked up. So I have to kind of disassemble it and clean it with vinegar and stuff. But are there any other products like that you are aware of that can be used as for a condensate drain?
Not really. That's about the only one I know of that goes into the Venturi. I know there's a couple that has like their own little pump. But what I recommend to people, if you got room for it, I recommend run it into get one of those shower sump boxes that's got its own bilge pump in it and everything. Or if you have a shower sump already and you can run it into that, that's your best bet. Because the problem with those condensators is it automatically, in order for it to work, restricts the flow of the water for it to, you know, create the Venturi effect. And it don't take a whole lot to block those up. So
Right.
yeah, if you have one of those, you do have to pull it apart periodically and maintain it. Okay.
Yep. Good point. Thanks.
All right, next one. It's everybody's favorite, sanitation system. All right. Again, you know, this is just going to be quick because every boat's just a little bit different. A lot of people I've noticed are starting to pull all this out and going to the composting toilets. I've heard good things and bad things about the composting toilets. The big thing with this here is when they build these boats, they don't use the highest quality of sanitation hoses on. They basically use the cheapest stuff they can find to put in there. And after a few years, the hoses itself start permeating. You'll start smelling it. And you don't really notice it when you're on the boat. Whenever you first come to your boat and open it up, you'll get this smell. And a lot of times that is from, just like I said, old hoses in here and stuff. So they got better hoses out now that you can, you know, put, swap these hoses out with. And then again, you know, I tell people as far as when you flush in these toilets, don't treat it like it's your toilet at the house. Just because whatever's in the bowl is gone, don't mean you need to stop flushing. I'd recommend, you know, keep flushing for a little bit, and that way it keeps it pushed out of that line, gets it into the holding tank, because that's the biggest problem you run into also with these old lines is they get a buildup in them. So now you have an 1.5 inch line that's only got like a 1/2 inch passageway through it. And, you know, that creates a lot of problems. It creates a lot of blockages and stuff. So, again, you know, with these here, keep flushing for a little bit. Now, a lot of people, another thing they're doing is to keep the smell down is they're converting their electric, and you really can only do this with electric toilets, is they're converting them over to fresh water. All right, because the problem you run into if the ones that flush from the seawater is the seawater that sits in there turns really nasty and it smells terrible. So again, you know, a lot of these smells are going to be coming on your boats coming from the sanitation system. So that any, you know, changing out hoses, keeping the lines clear, that also will help with keeping the smell stuff down. Another thing to remember is keeping your overboard through haul closed and your three-way valve closed until you're 3 miles offshore. That way the Coast Guard don't come in and find you, okay? All right, and this is one, everybody, you know, has a shore power cable and stuff. Pull it off periodically and make sure it's clean. Make sure there's no burnt marks or anything on it and stuff, because this here happened just from corrosion. They get corrosion built up in them, they start heating up, and then the minute you throw a load on them, they start burning up. So yeah, check them out, make sure you don't get into this position. All right. Yeah, there's another seminar next weekend. Bob Sloop's doing that one on racing and cruising. You also have a couple more. You got March 1st and March the 8th. So sign up for those. I think they've been a change on who's doing the next one, though. I don't think John Rom's doing the next one.
No, he is.
Yes, Darrell, if I could add, there's one next week on sales and sale maintenance. It's done by the woman at what is it in Evolution Sales. She'll be doing that next week, same time.
Gotcha. Okay. Look, I'm sorry, my bad. I was a little bit confused on the dates. So, and yeah, again, thank y'all for everybody for showing up, and like us on Facebook. We have a Facebook page there with everything, and we're also going to be at the boat show, the Oriental Boat Show this year. We're going to be doing a seminar on Saturday, the 12th at noon. Come by. Love to meet you face to face, and yeah. So, and again, I want to thank you for attending. Thank the school, ODC, NSA, for, sponsoring this. Thanks for Chuck, Sharon, Dennis, and Bob, for putting this together and having everything done. Again, I think it's turning out really well this year, and I know they put a lot of work into getting this organized stuff, so thank you all very much. All right. So any questions at this time? All right, we're gonna also pull up the chat, see if anybody has written anything in the chat and stuff. But another thing is, like you said, when we do this training and stuff, it's kind of a generic. But if anybody who owns a boat or wants to have training on their specific boats, we also offer that too. All right. What is a good insulation to use for a refrigeration box itself? The thin silver coated lining, it's crumbled up and rips. I tell you the truth, I'm not 100% sure on that. I don't really deal with the boxes that much. I know some people go in there with the spray foam if they got room and use the spray foam, but you got to be careful with the spray foam, because if you ain't careful, when it expands, it may crack the box or start just moving stuff around. So you got to be careful with that. Using fresh water to flush versus seawater. All right. Now I said electric toilets. All right. On the electric toilets, they convert them over to seawater. Well, you can also do what I've seen people do with the manual toilets is they'll go to close their seawater valve, turn it to dry flush, and then they'll just use jugs of water, fresh water, to flush the toilets that way. That'll also help keep that smell down. Okay. All right. Darrell, do you happen to have a simple diagram like this for galley plumbing? No, I do not, because unfortunately, every boat's galley plumbing is just a little bit different. But your basic galley plumbing is going to go. You got your holding tank. It's going to go to a pump of some sort, and then it's going to key to a water heater, and then you're going to have. A lot of times, though, if you have multiple tanks on your boat, there's going to be a valve manifold somewhere, so you can shift from one tank to the other. All right, scroll down. Okay. All right. And again, we thoroughly enjoy doing this. And if you have any questions, again, we'll be more than happy to. If you have any questions after this, give us a call, and we'll try to help you out any way we can. All right. So if there's no more questions, I think that's going to be the end of it. So, Bob, we'll get it back to you.
Hey, here's the remaining schedule for seminars. I hope you guys can attend it. And if you want to see this seminar or the past ones, I'll have them up on YouTube probably in a couple days or so. Dennis, do you want to wrap things up?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Just to let everyone know, next week I'll be giving a little synopsis of what NCO is all about. There's basically a dozen guys that help run it. It starts with the Special Olympics, where we donate there, and Chuck Gordon raised almost $3,000 to help support that. We then go into March and we feed 150 racers for 2 days. There's 3 to 4 regattas that we do. The dinghy poker run, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of hours that's put into that. So we can use support not just from our sponsors, but we have a PO box. It's box 146. If you folks would like to help support us, we gladly would accept any donations. This is for the community, and it's for the boaters. Having a guy like Darrell, his mobility and his expertise is almost unheard of in this day of AI. So we hope everyone continues to watch us, and we'll continue to try and improve this every week. Appreciate it. Thank you.